There were 69 conflicts last year where more than 25 people were killed. And that's a lot. We're also finding more and more countries now are engaged in conflicts beyond their own borders. 91 countries last year. And again, that's the largest which we've counted in the last 20 years, or since the inception of the Global Peace Index. Peace is a relative concept. You can only compare peace to something else. So there's no environment which is totally peaceful in the world, nor is there any environment which is totally violent. And so if we think of our own personal emotions, that's one of the ways of being able to look at peace. We both have many experiences of happiness, but we also do have some sadness. And so at a personal level, you can look at that as a definition of peace. We can see that the times we live in now are quite violent. So if we're looking today, there are more conflicts raging now than any time since the end of the Second World War. So there were 69 conflicts last year where more than 25 people were killed. And that's a lot. We're also finding more and more countries now are engaged in conflicts beyond their own borders. 91 countries last year. And again, that's the largest which we've counted in the last 20 years, or since the inception of the Global Peace Index. What we count is battlefield deaths. It's the 25 people of battlefield deaths. But that's a very interesting concept, because conflict isn't necessarily bad. So if you look at the two football teams competing, that's a conflict. That's a conflict. But we all know it's an excellent way for people to be able to take a position, identify with their tribe or their local club, and then it's expressed in a positive way. And we look at the competition between companies, or the competitive nature of business. And that's very, very good, because that many times drives innovation. So for us, what separates good conflicts from bad conflicts, or good competition from bad competition, is when it involves physical human suffering. So the first thing one needs is to have the money to invest. So nothing happens without investment. So investing in building the resilience so that when communities are faced with a shock, and that they don't cave into conflict. And you can see this especially when you're looking at environmental shocks. So you can have, let's say, two different ethnic groups. They'll have hostilities towards each other, but they need some sort of shock, which then throws them into conflict. And quite often it can be conflict over resources. So you get a protracted drought, would be one example. You get issues over resources, could even be over things as simple as fishing rights, or the water flowing down a river. And so the idea is to really be able to build the resilience within the communities and between the communities, so when faced with shocks, which might lead to violence, they got the ability to overcome it. And so this comes down to a whole range of things, and it comes down to like the local governance within the community. What we find is a lot of the more violent places in the world, the governments are unable to control their territory. Myanmar would be a classic example here in Asia, and you can see same thing in southern Philippines, very difficult to actually control the law and order there. You'll find it in West Papua New Guinea, with Indonesia as well, and many other places as well. You can see it right through Africa, particularly the Sahel. So strong government and effective government is really key, as there's a whole range of other things which we'd call positive peace. And so that consists the attitudes, institutions and structures which create for peaceful societies and sustainable societies. There are many, many different definitions of peace. So you can think about yourself personally. And so what is a personal definition of peace? And you could see that as the absence of afflictive emotion. Peace can simply mean, for a strong man, that no one's challenging their authority. That can be peace. And there can be negative peace, and that peace is called the absence of violence or fear of violence. And we use that to measure the Global Peace Index. And so that's a very, very good one for measuring. So it's like measuring the level of crime, the homicides, measuring the number of people in jail, the number of people dying in conflict, and other similar sorts of measures. And then there's positive peace, which is the attitude, institutions and structures which create and sustain peaceful societies. Now, that is the kind of peace which builds the resilience and prosperity into a community, which means it's a virtuous cycle, so it's always improving. And that would be the kind of peace which I think is very, very important to build. And it consists of 8 different pillars: well-functioning government, strong business environment, equitable distribution of resources, free flow of information, acceptance of the rights of others, low levels of corruption, and good relationships with neighbours. And they all come together in a systemic way. It's not that one's more important than the other, they all feed each other. And if you can get them all strong, you've now got a virtuous cycle where generally the societies will keep improving. This positive peace is also associated with the things we think are really important, like higher per capita income, better performance on measures of well-being, happiness, environmental measures, and also better developmental outcomes. There's a concept of the big man theory, and that's where one person changes and shapes history. But what we lose sight of is that individuals come out of an environment, and they can only become the big man in that environment if the environment actually allows them to do it. There's a lot of factors which affect peace. So quite often there's the concept of a natural resources curse. So countries with a lot of natural resources end up in conflict. And so we can see that in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. We can see it in many other different countries around the world. So there's something else which comes back into it, and that's the ability to be able to have the structures within the society which knows how to manage the natural resources appropriately and has the strength to be able to resist outside interference. Propagandas that existed right from the ancient times. Even if you went back to ancient India, there was propaganda. And we can go through the Roman times, we can see it reflected there. China, it had in the old dynasties, they had propaganda too, and the propaganda was always effective. Now, what's happened in the modern age, and a lot of it comes about through modern telecommunications, the whole area has been uplifted. So if we're thinking about the internet, certainly through social media and other forms, we're getting a lot of what you would call modern propaganda, but we call it misinformation now. But on the other hand, we've also never had the ability to get at so much accurate information as well. So for me, it's one of education. How do you teach people to have the skills to be able to pull out the information which is truly appropriate for them to have, and how to recognise and discard bad information? But the very tools which are used to create misinformation or propaganda can be also used to create correct information. So we look at the rise of AI. We'll put it in the context of terrorism, for example. So there's really persuasive new tools based on AI to radicalise people and get them to commit terrorist acts. But on the other hand, AI for intelligence agencies, they now in real time can start to see these people as they radicalise and then push appropriate information in front of them, so you can get a balance. So I think what's really important with misinformation as us as a society is understand where the good information is, and then how do we now use these new tools to be able to correct the misinformation.